welcome to Ahmedabad University. We are a research-based university. We believe in a different kind of education, and we invite speakers from outside to these kinds of forum. One such forum is a conversation series, and today we have an eminent speaker with us. So let me take this opportunity to introduce Professor Vishal Gupta. Professor Vishal Gupta is an associate professor in the organizational behavior area. Prior to joining Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, he worked as an assistant professor in the HRM group at the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. He has also worked as a hardware design engineer, and he spent some time in the industry before moving to the academics. Uh, in 2016, he got the Young Scientist Award in Social Sciences category by the National Academy of Sciences, India. Uh, Apart from that, we all know him. He's a great researcher and we all admire him. And he has very crucial professional associations and appointment. He's the member CII Gujarat State Task Force on Enhancing Competitiveness, Human Resource Development since May 2020 onwards. He's also the chairperson, uh, Ashank Desai Center for Leadership and Organizational Development at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He's also a member of Board of Governors, IIM Ahmedabad since December 2020. He's also the president, Indian Academy of Management, an affiliate of the Academy of Management, US from January 2020 to January 2022. He's also the independent director on the Board of Directors, Gujarat Gas Limited, India's largest city gas distribution company since 2017. And he's also individual member of the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in organizations in 2017, and he broadly researches in the area of leadership and organizational behavior and human resource. So we are thrilled to have you, Professor Gupta. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Ahmedabad University again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Pandey, for the kind introduction and for having me here.
Thank you, sir. The person who will be in conversation with Professor Vishal Gupta is Professor Swati Ghulyani. She's an assistant professor in organization and management area, and her PhD is in the organizational behavior and human resource management area. Her dissertation was on disability, identity, and social symbolic work, and that aims at disability inclusion in the workplace by bringing forward the narrative of disabled individuals. Prior to joining the PhD program, she worked as an HR journalist at NEC Technology India Private Limited. She has published in prestigious journals, and her case studies have been published by the IB and I'm Raipur ET cases. Few of her recent co-authored papers have been published in Indian Journal of Education Management and Journal of Knowledge Management. And she broadly teaches in OB area and researches in this domain. So I welcome Professor Swati Ghulyani. Before I hand it over to her, I request everybody to keep their audio and video mute during the conversation. And I request you to put your questions in the chat box. We'll take all the questions, and when the conversation ends around 5 p.m., we'll take all the questions and our speakers will address. So thank you so much for joining us. And I request now Professor Swati Ghulyani to take it forward.
Thank you very much, Professor Pandey. Thank you for the warm welcome and the introductions. And thank you, Professor Gupta, for joining us today. I think the poll questions, the opinions of our audience was quite unique and somewhere aligns what you're talking about in your book as well. But before we go on to your book, Professor Gupta, let's talk about you. You are a professor at IIM Ahmedabad, and both students as well as early career academics who have done any kind of training under you, they look up to you. And two very prominent things that I've heard, and I myself have felt as being trained under you, is that you have a very vast demand on the topic that you teach, and also you come to that with a warmth and a calm attitude. These also are in very much alignment with what you look up in a leader as well in an organization. So if you take it to your research and the extensive research as well as your industry experience, what kind of characteristics do you think are there should be there in an effective leader, and especially when it comes to a country like India, where there is a high power distance?
So thank you, Swati, actually for that first uh, icebreaker, if I can say, for the conversation. So let me be very honest. While you mentioned that there are people who, like you, have attended some of my workshops and so on, but what I have always tried to do, I'll come to the leadership question in a while, but what I have always tried to do is to emulate some of my teachers who, under whom I sort of studied or I learned while I was doing my PhD. I'm very fortunate. One of them is right here listening to the talk, Professor Ramadhar Singh. And I remember I was in third year when he came to IIM Lucknow and he took a session. It was a marathon session on factor analysis and structural models and a whole lot of things that he talked to us. So one of the qualities that has always left a big impression on me, which I have tried to sort of emulate in my own teachings and carry forward in my interactions with students thereafter, has been the deep sense of concern for the students, and to sort of try and give whatever I could as an instructor, as a professor to the students. We'll come to that in a while. But coming back to the broad question that you asked, which is the qualities of leaders in today's time. Well, you see, we are living in a world which is very dynamic, and I don't need to really belabor this point because we are all experiencing ourselves the kind of deep changes that we are seeing in our society, in the ways in our organizations work, in the way education is happening, in the way work is happening. So the first quality, broadly, if I can say, is for the leader to not lose this deep sense of compassion and care for the people with whom he or she is working. There are challenges, there are pressures of work on everybody, right? But in order to be really looked up to in the organization, I personally feel, and this also came up in the work that I have done with knowledge organizations, is to come across as somebody who is caring and also somebody who is seen as a person of integrity, as somebody whom you would look up to, right, as an individual. So uh, two things to maybe just respond to this first question is to have that sense of care and to be seen as a person of integrity. And as I was mentioning, I have had innumerable experiences when I was doing my research with knowledge organizations where people came up to me and said, well, Vishal, that supervisor is no more here around us. But whenever I have to think about that supervisor, I always think about that person. And the same I experienced today. My guides are not there, but not around me. But whenever I have to think of a professor, those few people under whom I learned, they always come up to me, and they set those standards of work ethic, and that's is something which is very important for everybody to maybe keep in mind.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for highlighting the fact that we emulate our teachers and we look up to them, and the warmth extended from that is one thing that even I look up at my teachers on that and try to emulate the same. And now that Professor Gupta, you have already mentioned about the context that is of knowledge-based organizations wherein you have done so much research, and your book, First Among Equals, a treat framework for youth. is also in that setting of knowledge intensive organizations, and we'll be talking about that, and our audience is curious to know about that. But before that, can we spend some time on talking about what are these knowledge intensive organizations that you're talking about, and how are they different from other types of organizations?
Okay, so well, you see, when I try to when we talk about knowledge organizations are those organizations. If I were to maybe put it in a sentence, I would say knowledge organization is any organization where people are thinking for a living, right? That means you have to think and come up with something new, right? You cannot be doing routine kind of activities day in and day out. So the prime example of these organizations are R&D organizations, R&D departments or R&D organizations. For example, research universities like Ahmedabad University, like the IIMs, the IITs, where for a faculty, the job description as well, you've got to think about something new. Your research should come up, or your research should bring out new insights. Similarly, there are organizations, are R&D organizations, research and development organizations, high-tech organizations, where consulting organizations, where you are continuously bombarded with newer problems, right? You find solution to one problem, but then the problem changes, right? And you have to now start working on something new. So you have to keep pushing the boundary of knowledge. So it is an organization, it is a work setting where individuals have to keep creating knowledge, right? These are organizations where the job description of employees is to be innovative, is to be creative, right? You've got to you are benchmarked, you are measured, you are appraised on what are the creative outcomes you are coming up with. So these kinds of settings are very different from what you would see in a manufacturing where or even a setting where you are doing a routine or a monotonous kind of a job, because my job description itself tells me, well, you have to be creative, you have to be innovative, you have to come up with something new. So that in a sense is what I would like to call as knowledge based organizations. And this is not a definition that I have coined. This is a definition where which exists in literature about knowledge intensive organizations. And the outcome is to be innovative, right? To be creative. And the individuals working in these settings have to be doing new things, novel things, creating novel services and products.
Okay. When we talk about, a country like India, where at the moment such kind of organizations are still budding.
Yeah.
And in the long run, we may still see many such organizations. So at this point of time, if we look at India, what kind of significance do such organizations have?
Well, I think we need these organizations. So I will try to answer this question in two parts. The first part is, if you look at the innovation index that was released in 2021, India today ranks 48, I think. So it is the first time we have come below 50, right? But we are still very far from US or Singapore or even China, right? So in terms of innovation, we are far behind as a country. Now, if you look at the I think it is quite known, the economic survey in January 2021, the annual economic surveys, it reported that we are spending as a country only about 0.6 to 0.7% of our GDP on research and development, whereas the developed countries are spending up to 3%. 3 or more percent of their GDP on research and development activities. So again, there is a huge scope where our country needs to maybe grow or expand. And the third important point here on the statistics is, very surprisingly, India is a country, out of these innovative countries, if you were to look at, India is one country where our research and development is actually driven by government organizations and not by private sector organizations. Our private sector spending is only about 40% of the current spending on R&D activities as a country. Whereas if you look at developed societies, their business organizations are actually spending up to 60 to 70% of their of the country's R&D expenses are being borne by private sector organizations. India is one country where our R&D is actually being driven by government sector, and we are spending, so the government's contribution is about 52% currently out of the 100% the GDP, the spend on research and development. So in terms of significance, well, I truly believe that as a nation, we are not doing enough on knowledge creation. We are not doing enough on R&D, right? And there is a need, there is a wide gap to actually bridge by both governments, but as well as the private sector organizations. So we need to understand, first of all, what these organizations are, and then how do you manage research and development activities in a society like ours. The second thing that I would like to mention, and if you look at how our work is expanding today, how the work is evolving today, I truly believe that anything that can be automated will eventually get automated, right? So there is a huge fear that with this artificial intelligence coming in, machine learning, the technology is coming in, what will humans do? All our jobs will go away, will be taken away. So we will be actually rendered jobless. So what will humans do? Humans will have to move to knowledge work, right? That is a domain that technology will not be able to take, at least for some time. So this abstract thinking, this creative thinking, this creation of new knowledge is something that we will be required. Humans will have to come in. And therefore, it again becomes very important for leaders and organizations to understand, how do we manage these people, right? How do we manage a person whose job description says failure is okay, right? The job description itself says experiment. And with experimentation, there could be a lot of failure. So how do I manage it? How do I appraise it? How do I motivate such a person, right? So I think that is, in terms of the significance, we have a lot of ground to cover, and to understand how should we be actually managing and setting up such organizations.
Thank you for pointing that out. And since the context of your book also talks about knowledge-based organizations and the kind of leaders who should be there in such organizations. So let's talk a little about your book, and specifically on two things that I would request you to talk about more. First, of course, is the title of the book, First Among Equals. So what do you mean by that, and can you talk to our audience about the title of the book, and also about the framework that you have specified in the book through your extensive research? So both the things.
So let me just give before I go there, Swati, let me give you a brief background of where I came from when I went to my PhD, or what was my background when. So my first training was as an engineer. I did my engineering from BITS Pilani in electronics engineering. And after my graduation, I worked in corporate for about 3.5 years. Half a year I was in Germany, and then 3 years I spent in India. And I was actually working as an R&D engineer, right? So my background before I actually went to do my PhD was an R&D engineer. So one of the things that that used to really strike me when I was actually doing my job was, well, I need a different kind of a treatment. Well, because I am into R&D, so I cannot be expected to have the same kind of office timings or the same kind of treatment, because you cannot compare me with somebody who has to just design a circuit which is already been done, which is like repeating what has been done. So there is somebody who has to develop something new. On the other hand, there is somebody who is doing the same kind of a work. So it used to really strike me that, well, there is something missing here in the way we actually manage these kind of professionals or people who are working in this domain. So my thesis was actually looking at, focused on, once I started my research work, my topic was to explore leadership characteristics required for R&D settings and R&D professionals. The organization that I looked was, I surveyed about 11 research and development laboratories of CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. This was a funded project by CSIR. And CSIR, by the way, for your information, is India's largest civilian research organization. So they, of the 52% spending that I was talking about, CSIR is perhaps one of the biggest contributors to Indian R&D, civilian R&D. We have the defense R&D, but we also have CSIR doing that. So through this research, which was both a mix of qualitative and quantitative set of studies, I sort of developed an understanding of this title. You asked me to talk about the title, The First Among Equals. So what does this really mean? The first among equals is the equals part here. By equal, I try to emphasize, or I have tried to mention in the book, that knowledge is a great leveler, right? So a knowledge-based organization is an organization where there should be no hierarchies, right? So we should all be considered as an equal. And if you look at, because we are essentially talking about ideas, the currency of these organizations is ideas. And ideas can come even from the lowest rung. So if you were to think about, well, I am the leader or I am the boss, so only I can get the idea and the people below me cannot give me ideas. Well, you are mistaken, because this is something where anybody can come up with ideas. So being equal, having that equal mindset is very important. It takes away the arrogance part. It should take away the arrogance part. It should take away that hierarchy mindset. And then the first among equals. So first is when we say the first part, that you as the leader, you happen to be the leader, you happen to be the person who is standing in front, and therefore you need to be ensuring that if there is any failure or there is any risk or there is any problem, you are there to support the team, you are there to take care of the people, you are there to actually ensure that the work that is being done, the people who are working are taken care of as a leader. So you are the first among equals because you are standing in the front as and designated as a leader. So that's the idea of the first among equals part. The second, which is about the treat framework. So I so if you look at the treat, it was an acronym. To be very honest, the papers that I actually published, they did talk about the 5 behaviors, but the treat acronym came much later. So if you look at the papers that I have published on my dissertation, they do not talk about the treat word. They do talk about these 5 behaviors, but the acronym has emerged while my subsequent research and thinking about this issue. So the TREAT acronym essentially says 5 behaviors or 5 important aspects that leaders must keep in mind. The first two, T and R, stands for task orientation, and the R part stands for relation orientation. So this comes out from the very famous task versus relation framework that we have had, Blake and Mountain's grid. Even our Professor J.B.P. Sinha, he had mentioned for the Indian context, 1980, he talked about the nurture and task leadership, right? Where he mentioned the importance of nurturance as well as task orientation. And then he said, with nurturance over time, you can become participative. So it became NTP, nurturing task participative leadership model that he had proposed. So the task and relation orientations are similar, that as a leader, and the significance of T coming right in the front is what I have tried to emphasize in the book as well, that as a leader, your first job is to get the task done, right? So you have to be task oriented. In order to be task oriented, you need to know what is the job. You need to be able to explain the job to your people, right? Explain to them what are the roles and responsibilities of individuals. You should be able to monitor the progress and solve any problems that emerge while task is being done. Then comes the relation. Relation is about facilitation and support, right? And I have mentioned communication and recognitions are very important aspect of relation orientation. As a leader, you've got to recognize and also have an environment where people can communicate freely. Then comes the E, which is the empowering part, which was again something that was proposed by Professor J.B.P. Sinha when he mentioned that with time you can people move to participative. As you have people becoming mature, you can engage and participate. So empowering here, and it becomes especially important, right? If you look at the poll that we had done, right? If you see the last part, how do you become a leader? Well, empowering emerged out of 28 people, 16 people responded that empowering is very important, right? And this is exactly the point, because you see, with knowledge, with exposure, with education, people demand a different kind of a relationship. You cannot be told all the time what has to be done. You need to give freedom to people to experiment, to explore, come up with their own ways of solving the problem, right? Listening to their opinions, consulting them while you are making the decision. That becomes very important. And then the A part is about authenticity. Authenticity here, I mean that, well, walk the talk, leading by example. It is again something which I was mentioning, the integrity of people who are in those leadership positions is very important. And the last is team building. So this again, if you look at the second poll that you had done, which said, what should the leader do? So inspire the team to work and achieve the goals. So in research and development, nothing happens standalone. So even as faculty today, you see how many papers that we write are solo authored papers, right? Very few, very few. Usually it is a teamwork and people need to come together and work as a team. So if we are creating new knowledge, if we are trying to do something, it is very difficult to do it all alone. So we need to have teams. And there is a huge amount of effort and thought that should go in creating teams that are cohesive and uh, uh, and productive in a sense, right? So that sort of summarizes the TREAT framework, which stands for task, relation, empowering, authenticity, and team building. And just to help people understand, I wrote in the book that, well, when you treat people well, people will find it a treat to work under you as a as a leader. So you've got to treat them well in order to get the work done. So that's the broad idea that I have tried to present on the treat.
Okay, thank you. And so while you were talking, you, of course, in each part of the framework or in each of the 5 behaviors, the most essential thing is the relation with the followers. I'll call it followers, although you call equals, so that leader follower kind of hierarchy. I don't know how to place it, but any kind of relation, there are 2 parties. So
yes, absolutely.
yes. So when we, you're talking about this framework and through your research, what kind of follower behaviors were, found and through your research and other experiences?
Yeah, so that is a very, very important question, and thank you for asking that, Swati. When you look at this aspect that I'm talking about, follower characteristics is very important. So let me just give you a brief detail. When I studied this organization, so I surveyed about 600 scientists working in these 11 research and development laboratories. So these were actually people who were involved in doing research and development activities. Would you believe that 70% of my sample were PhD and postdoc holders? So they were all postdocs, or they were, a minimum qualification was they had PhD degrees. The remaining 25%, they had a master's degree. So they just didn't have a graduation, they also had a master's degree, and only the 5% of the sample had a graduation degree. So what is the follower characteristic that we are looking at? The follower characteristic looking at is that somebody who is having that maturity, right? So these are people who have been trained. These are people who have been trained in research. They have the knowledge about the work that they are doing, and therefore they can engage in a kind of interaction which is different from one where the person is not knowledgeable about the work, right? So in terms of follower characteristics, I think in order to make this model work well, there needs to be some kind of maturity that should be there at the followers' side, also in terms of their own development, their own knowledge, and their own capabilities of doing that particular work. So if I'm working today with a senior, I will demand a different kind of characteristic or a different kind of a relationship as compared to somebody who's just started his or her PhD, right? So that is the kind of my thoughts on the follower characteristics.
Okay. And so in terms of, followers, there is also, some kind of, there is a role played by the leader. And we saw this again in our polls also, that in terms of inducing that kind of positive thinking in the followers, especially if you look at the current times when we are in crisis and, people are under stress and demotivated about many things. So over here, your in your book, you talk about things like psychological capital and other positive psychological behaviors. And so can you talk a little about what is psychological capital and what is the role of a leader in inducing such kind of psychological capital in followers?
Well, so in the book, I've talked about 4 qualities, and this is a construct quite established in literature. We call it as positive capabilities in individuals, right? And these positive capabilities are developmental. That means they can be developed in individuals over time, and they contribute to performance in a positive manner. So what are these qualities? Well, some people call it as hero framework. So I would actually, I like to call it as horse, right? Riding your own horse. Okay. And so it stands for, H stands for hope, O stands for optimism, R stands for resilience, and SE stands for self-efficacy, right? So hope is essentially, so these are capabilities that are, and why did I look at these capabilities? Because during my interviews, I had interviewed about 52 scientists before I did my large sample survey, the 600 scientists that I was talking about. I interviewed 52 scientists across levels. So, starting from junior most scientists to directors of research labs. And one of the things that they were talking about repeatedly is, in a knowledge setting, it is very important to have a positive outlook, because your work is going to create, is going to lead to failures, is going to lead to rejections and dejections a lot of times. So individuals need to have positive qualities and capabilities in order to survive and sustain in a work which is very, very knowledge intensive. And I think I have seen it over the years in the profession as a researcher myself. I can relate to these ideas. So you need to be hopeful. What is hope? Hope says that, well, if there is a path that is getting blocked, you can think of other alternatives, right? You can make alternate pathways. That is about hope. Optimism is having a positive outlook. When you meet failure, okay, when you sort of don't let that rejection or failure impact your mental state, right? So you remain optimistic that good things will happen. Resilience is having that strength to bounce back, okay, being resilient in times of failure, that, well, I will not uh, drop my arms, I will continue working. And the last is having that confidence, self-efficacy, having that belief in your abilities, belief in your potential, belief in your skills when you are doing this kind of a work. So, well, these ideas are important, and leaders have a great role to play. I think the biggest way in which leaders can impact horse of their, or the hero or the horse of their subordinates is by role modeling, is by demonstrating it themselves. I remember when my first paper got rejected, I went to my PhD supervisor and I was very, very sad. I was like, my first rejection, and he was sitting right in front of me, and he said, Vishal, if you will start getting so dejected after a rejection, then you are not in the right profession, because this is going to be a part of your life. Okay, believe it or not, you will keep getting rejected in a lot of journals. But the point is, you should not lose hope. You should get up and start working, understand what were your limitations, get up. And he narrated his own experiences, his own stories, right? How they had grown in their own careers. And I think that role modeling, that vicarious learning is very, very important. When you see leaders demonstrating that in their own behaviors, you see that hope, optimism, resilience, and belief in their capabilities, it sort of rubs on to you. And as a leader, I think, and that is where leading by example, that demonstrations is very important for individuals. You've got to let people, you got to show people through your own experiences, and show them through these behaviors, and try to, that could, at least that is what I have sort of presented in the book also, that leaders can impact positively these kind of capabilities in individuals.
While you were talking, I was also wondering, on the other side, that is not so good or the positive side, but the dark side. So somewhere in 2008, 2009, Professor Jeffrey Pfeffer in his book wrote that leaders who are empathizing, who are authentic and humanizing with that humanistic kind of attitude, all this is a myth. And though we are blessed that we have got good guides whose behavior even we also emulate, and they have been an important part in our growth and development, but there is an other side to it as well, which is comes under abusive supervision and abusive leadership. So in your research, I mean, or when you were meeting people in CSI, they were such kind of leaders did you come across, and does your research throws any kind of light on such kind?
Well, plenty of them actually. So you see, what is negative only demonstrates, at least to my mind, negative only demonstrates the absence of positive. Right? So when you talk about the negative experience, you all the more emphasize the importance of the positive. Right? So when we start talking about inauthenticity, we start talking about people who lack integrity, people who lack courage to say what they want to say, or who have a difference between what they say and what they do. I think it only demonstrates to us the importance of these values. Now, I completely agree with Professor Pfeffer that these ideas do not work in extremes. So let me qualify here. And in my authenticity, if you read the book, I have also written that authentic people are also very courageous because they are able to take difficult decisions. Right. So you see, as a leader, there will be many times where you will need to take difficult decisions, that they will not be easy decisions about firing people. So when I say empathetic, I do not mean that leaders do not lay off or do not fire people. Well, if there is underperformance, you've got to take tough decisions, right? So the whole point here is, if we are talking about authenticity, we are not saying that it will work all the time. That means, as there will be times where you will need to be very, 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 very strong and tough. When it comes to humility, please don't understand that humble people should not take tough stands, right? But the point is, you need to know. I think the biggest difference that we must all realize is that what are the right moments to demonstrate these ideas, and what are the moments where we will need to deviate from them and take tough stands, take uh, difficult decisions, right? So I don't need to be, and I myself, I'm not humble with somebody who even after my repeated explanations is not doing the work, because then what Professor Pfeffer says, then it is going to impact my performance, then it is going to impact me as an individual, right? So I think what we need to understand is what are those moments of, let me actually put it like this, what are those moments of authenticity, what are those moments of integrity that are crucial where we need to demonstrate them? And what are those moments where it is important for us to even maybe deviate and take another stand in order to do good for us as well as the larger organization that we are leading, or the group that we are leading. So that is my take on this. But I do believe these are very important ideas. These are time-tested ideas. If there are 46 people in this room, I can ask each one of you to close your eyes and think of example of a good leader, and what are some of, and we have already seen in the poll as well, right? I really look up to people who have shown integrity, right? Who have demonstrated. So these are things that inspire me to do better. Maybe I don't live it at all moments, but there will be many moments where I try to emulate those ideas and see to it that I'm trying to reach there. or trying to do better.
Okay, so yeah, that puts leaders in a difficult situation. Of course, there is so much expectation, and a leader is always imagined that kind of a larger than life kind of a figure. And especially right now, when we talk about the pandemic, and you talk about knowledge intensive organizations as well, it's not just everyone is facing stress, not just the leader, not just the followers, but everyone. So in that case, the leader has to take one step above and demonstrate their leadership qualities to run the organizations. So specifically when this time of crisis, how are knowledge intensive organizations kind of coping, and the leaders coping this crisis situation and coming out of it?
We are not doing very well, let me say that. So Microsoft recently released 2021, they released the work trends study. And well, they surveyed people who are doing remote work, okay, for the last 1.5 years or so. And what the report actually showed, that about 41% people have resigned in April 21. That means by April 2021, about 41% of workforce has been contemplating of resigning from their jobs, which is close to, I think, if I remember the number correct, about 4 to 6 million people coming out of the job. So this is called as the great resignation phase, right? So because people have found that, and this is just, I'm quoting some numbers from the survey that I remember, about 67% of people felt that they needed more in-person time with their teams, right? There is more isolation. Gen Z is the generation which is under tremendous suffering, because you see, who are those Gen Z people? They were the bachelors, right? Who would spend a large amount of time in the corporates, having the breakfast, lunch, dinner in those organizations, right? They did not have families, so they could hang out with their friends, colleagues in offices. But all of that is gone, right? So there is a huge amount of, there have been people who've mentioned that their bosses have their bosses have about 20% of the people, they said that their leaders do not take care of the work-life balance, right? And anecdotal evidence suggests the same. I have a colleague's wife who works with Oracle, and she says that, well, the meetings go on till 7:38 because it is all online now, right? So we can schedule meetings anytime. So I think the importance of this compassion, the empathy, and the relation orientation, I think we need to demonstrate even in greater quantities at this time. And I would sympathize with the leader also, because you very rightly said, one of the things that we have with when we talk about leaders is we think they are gods, right? And this is, the more I think about it, I think it is our Indian culture problem. We have always been trained to think about our leaders or boss or our politicians as gods, and we have a very different way of working with them. So we think they will do everything. The problem there is we leave that equality aspect, right? And we don't raise voices. The leaders are also under tremendous stress because they have to save their own jobs, so they have to get work done. I think across all levels, we need a lot more empathy, a lot more compassion, relation orientation, support, uh, in order to manage the stress that has come with these times.
So in these times itself, technology has also played a very important role in sort of channelizing the relations between, because we are not meeting and it's every connection is through a technology only. And how, technology, or there is a budding term called e-leadership that has played an important role in facilitating leaders' behavior. On one side, it can be used for micromanagement as well. But on the other side, we talk about empathy and compassion. So how can, how has it been used to drive these kind of behaviors?
So you mentioned the monitoring part here, or
Yeah, I'm saying that both the sides are there. Technology first facilitates monitoring, but we expect that leaders should not be micromanaging, and especially in equals kind of an organization.
yeah. So I think we will need to, and it is going to be increasingly difficult to monitor if we are talking about these. It actually, to me, it actually finds very uh, awkward, or even to some extent stupid, to say that, well, you are working from home, but you have to clock these hours. So I don't think, and if we are talking about these times, I think what we need is to be a lot more flexible. And that is what the whole idea of a knowledge work, or these high-tech kind of a work is. Well, you give the work to people and you expect the work to be done. That should be more important than the number of hours. Yes, if there are meetings, those can be scheduled. Those are, if there are things that have to be done, you can find smarter ways of monitoring than actually using technology to say how much time you have logged in, or you have how much time you have sat in front of the computer, and so on, because that does not make sense. If you are a woman, you have to not and you are now working from home, you are not, the work has actually doubled, right? Because you have to now manage your 100% at home. You have to take care of a lot of things at home and then also work. So this idea of monitoring, I think it is going to become more and more redundant if we are to continue in this kind of a work setting. And the sooner people realize it, the better it will be. There are reports already coming out that a lot of women are already thinking of leaving their jobs, because it is physically very difficult to manage a family at home, being at home, and then also to sort of work all the time, right? So I think we need to be more flexible in how we would want to manage or monitor our workforce than using those rudimentary scientific management kind of methods to say, okay, clock this hours, these many hours, and we'll consider you as working.
This also brings us to the last part of our conversation, and I think many of our members come from the academic background. So, you are talking in your book, you're talking about organizations like in Mody, which are, technology centric, innovation driven, where rules, regulations, all these things don't matter much. And it is that is kind of top down. Organizations are like Netflix and others. But when we talk about academic institutes like Ahmedabad University, like IIM Ahmedabad, they are still not so much technology driven, to some extent innovation centric. Yeah, but they do not really match all those characteristics of an R&D or in Mody kind of an organization. So how does your framework translates into such kind of educational settings?
Well, as I was mentioning earlier, Swati, I think it is important to understand that this is not a technology issue. This is a work related issue. That what is the kind of work and what are the expectations that you have from your people, right? So to me, it is a mindset issue, right? So if you consider, I would like to consider IIM Ahmedabad to be very close to Mody. Maybe we are not doing technology work, but we are doing research work, right? We are expected to write papers. We are expected to, even our courses, year on year, we are expected to do something new in our courses, right? So you have to keep thinking about what is it that you should be doing, what are the things that you can bring in. Now, uh, well, I can quote many examples from. I am very fortunate to have actually seen this kind of practices at IIM Ahmedabad. Not just IIM Ahmedabad, uh, even my right from my college days. Right, I have had many examples of professors, even though we were students. So, undergrad students or PhD students, there were many professors who would treat us as if we were mature individuals, right? We could have conversations about life, not just about engineering. We could have conversations about life. We would cook food together, right? So there were two professors, uh, they were wardens of our hostels, and we would go to their house, cook food together, eat, and then share stories, talk about experiences, and learn. They would be very happy to learn from our experiences as students, and we would obviously look up to some of the experiences that they were sharing with us as professors. When I went to went to IIM Lucknow for my PhD, I remember when I wrote my first paper, I put my supervisor's name first and my name second. And he told me that no, this is your paper, your name should be the first. And after that, I never asked him again whose name should go first in the paper. So we had a very clear understanding of the way the way we were treated. And I think at least my attempt is when I teach students, the same kind of mindset is what I try uh, to follow. I would, even though maybe they are just starting out their PhDs, but to have that mindset that they may have some useful ideas, right? They may need some guidance, and I'm there to give that guidance. But they may have some nice, interesting observations which I should listen to carefully before dismissing them as nonsense or not applicable or impracticable. And so maybe those ideas can give us some fresh grounds to think, and so on. So my understanding, Swati, would be that actually education institutes, if we were to actually follow what we are supposed to do, which is to keep thinking, and even if we are not publishing, but to think about our courses, our programs, how can we do them better? What are the innovations we can bring into our pedagogies and so on? I think we are knowledge intensive, and therefore this kind of a mindset is very important to have the while interacting with professors, while interacting with students. And obviously, as I mentioned, the followers should have that maturity to accept this kind of a relationship being offered.
Um, when you're talking about, of course, the experiences that you had, there might be a kind of equal relation between the faculty and you in be it your engineering or in the PhD. But still, in general, in the Indian education
Yes,
system, there is a kind of hierarchy, and
yes,
and there's a
yes,
invisible barrier also between
yes.
student and the teacher. How can we bring that especially your model into the classroom and, interactive kind of a
Well,
teaching?
let me give you an example, and this is just an anecdotal evidence because we are now talking about education, right? Which was not my domain of. But let me give you an example. My daughter is 7 years old, right? The school that she goes to, the first thing then when she got admitted into the school, the first thing that the teacher told was every question is respected. Every question, all questions are respected, understood, and also answered. So there is no question that you should think is stupid and you should not ask. Now, I'm talking about a 7-year-old child. So we know we have grown up, and I have myself grown up in Lucknow in a very traditional school where we had those kinds of relationships that we were offered. But I think with the society, and again, I'm quoting Professor J.B.P. Sinha in his 2008 book on understanding organization behavior. He writes that India today, and this was his 2008 textbook, he wrote that India today comprises of two cultures. One is the traditional power distance, very collectivist kind of culture that we all associated. We have grown up reading as doctoral students. This is India, right? But there is also another India today that is getting educated in IITs and IIMs, which is exposed to the world, which knows how US works, which is getting jobs in MNCs, right? So they are actually getting inducted into a very different kind of a work environment. They are getting inducted into a very different way of looking at the world, right? So we cannot impose the same kind of relationships that we were expecting of this India on the other India. So today, as and believe me, I truly believe that as the society progresses, we will become more individualistic, and we are becoming. Go to Gurgaon, go to develop, even in Ahmedabad, neighbors may not know each other, neighbors may not listen to each other, right? So we are individualistic, right? Gone are those days when we would say, well, we are collectivist and we will do these kinds of. So as the society progresses, I think breaking of these power hierarchies and becoming individualistic is a common expected and a natural process. So we will have to also modify our educational norms and look at these international schools. These international schools, or whatever, the new schools, the new age schools, not just international, there are many schools, right? In Ahmedabad itself, we have many examples. So there are schools which are actually training children to ask questions, that all questions are actually expected and respected, right? So I need to create us a workforce, a society where everybody should be able to ask questions rather than thinking. And this is what we need to adopt in our colleges as well, in our teaching. And I am very happy that IIM Ahmedabad says that everybody is a participant. Nobody is a professor, nobody is a student. We are all participants, right? Which is a mindset, right? To say that, well, we are equals. Maybe I have read a little more, but it does not mean you will not get good ideas and I should not listen to you. That's the.
I think this also closes the circle of being unequal in the conversation. Only then you will be able to ask questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that point. If you are not equal, how will you ask a question?
Yeah, right. And I think one learning that I'm going to carry is that compassion, not just in your thoughts, but also in actions, which is something that we have to learn as teachers, as well as, future leaders?
Yeah, be very firm, be very firm, but your heart is of gold. And I can say that because Professor Ramadar Singh is listening, that be firm, but your heart is of gold, right? We know how compassionate you are.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Gupta. I think we had a good and enriching interaction on leaders, especially in the new age leaders. Our chat box is flooding with a lot of comments and questions from the participants. I'll use the term participants now, and I'll hand over to Professor Pandey to take this forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. This was actually very engaging. So people have a lot of questions. So Professor Supratim Das Gupta had the first question,
Yeah.
and I would like to invite him. He would like to ask the question in person. Yes, Professor Supratim.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful conversation to both the participants. Um, my question was, coming to George Orwell's words, I mean, all men are born equal, but some are more equal than the others. So I hope that's not true. So the question was, my first question was, so are we going to from a role model to a role leader approach? When I say model, I mean, I'm not talking about entertainment. I'm talking about a role model being somebody who is a supervisor to a given task, and the task is probably I'm thinking of in an assembly line, for example, like a design process where the process is predefined, and the manager or the supervisor, whichever way you call it, or the participant has to just monitor that everybody is doing the work, or somebody is not doing the work. But when you're talking about a leader, it is not necessarily supervising in that way, but it's more inspiring and probably encouraging that people solve the problem, but in their own way and in their own pace. So am I correct on that?
Yeah, so I would just like to, and I always ask this when I'm doing any training on with professionals. I always ask, my first question to them is, who is a leader? How do you understand a leader? What is the role of a leader, right? And the point that I try to drive home is that the leader's core task is to influence, right? Is to influence. The moment you are able to influence somebody, you are no more required. So I actually say that a good leader is actually working to make him or her redundant, because he is not needed anymore. Because if I am inspired, today I don't need my supervisor around. I remember him in my actions, and I always try to emulate him and try to work to sort of live up to those standards that I saw, right? So the point is, rather than supervision, a manager commands, a leader influences. And when you are able to influence somebody, you win their motivation, that self commitment. So today I don't need to be sitting here, right, on the top of my subordinate and say, "Bhai, every hour report me or every day report me," right? If that person has got that commitment, he or she will do it by themselves. And I think that is where we need more influencers in our society, right? People whom we can emulate, whom we will like to emulate. And once you get that commitment, the leader is no more needed, right? I will do that work, and I will try to do that work by myself. Yeah. So I think that is the change we would want to.
Yeah, and I had like a small follow-up question of your horse, that you mentioned, your horse approach. So
Yes.
does that only work in knowledge organizations or
No, no,
non-knowledge
no.
organizations?
I think that is an individual thing, right? I think that is something that is applicable. It is more like a personality issue, right? It is more like our own capabilities, and these are things that are needed, uh, and whatever you do, right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
So the other question is by Professor Amol, and he requested processing would like to say something. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. Vishal, when did we meet? 2012.
Yes, 2011.
11. Okay.
2000.
So almost 10 years now, I think. First, I would like to congratulate you on the way you have grown now. You have become a real management guru. You know, the way you are presenting and answering these questions. But, you know, as I listened to you, I have given few comments.
Okay.
When you said substitute, that Jeremiah and Kay's 1976 paper, that commitment professionalism, then Komaki saying that good and bad leaders differ not in creating situation for work, not in giving reward, but in monitoring. So one gives accurate reinforcement, another gives reinforcement randomly. And a third sense of discomfort I felt that when you said knowledge organization, and I also, my colleague Das Gupta also raised this, that when you said knowledge organization, right, unless you demonstrate that what you are saying here are not happening in elsewhere, then knowledge becomes simply you have a certain knowledge, so you are putting it. That's what not be hard.
Yes.
Since you come to say that it is knowledge organization, you should also show that it is not happening in non-knowledge organization. Then it becomes truly knowledge.
Yes.
Otherwise, you may be coming up with a new way of leading, which may be the demand of the growing democracy and technology over the world. Also, our income capability, earning power,
Yes.
that's why we are becoming more individualistic.
Yes.
And democracy always has the goal of making each one individual, right?
Yes.
So as long as I develop commitment, I am matured, I am professional, right? I don't need the leader. So the leader is the one who has legitimate power, not really expert power. This is the way I understood it. Like your entire thing, if I write it in 2,000 words, put something like this, that when you say what first among equal, first is with respect to legitimate power. But in terms of expertise, commitment, and professionalism, we are equal. Something like this would be catchy. Otherwise, at the time, your title is like typical manager, management professor with so many big buzzwords.
Okay, while sir is unmuting himself, I think there is something. So I have one quick question that I would like to ask by Professor Amol. How do we look at political leaders vis-a-vis business leaders? And what are the similarities and what are the differences? What can they learn from each other? I think this is a very crucial question nowadays. Yeah.
Well, political leaders, I think the magnitude of the challenge that political leaders are working with is manifold than what the organization leaders are facing. So the task of a political leader is much more complex than what a business leader takes or undergoes. So to answer this very succinctly, I would say a political needs to learn professionalism from a business leader, how to maybe be a lot more. So when we say professionals, we actually mean that in terms of managing, also in terms of education about a particular topic and understanding the issue. So there is definitely a need for political leaders to be professional, to become more professional and adopt better management practices that businesses use. And if businesses have to learn something from politics, I would say the extent of complexity is enormous in a political situation for a political leader. So how do you manage those multiple demands, right? So if you were to just look at Narendra Modi or any other leader, right, our chief minister or prime minister, there are so many issues at the societal level, at the cultural level, at the uh, caste and creed and religion levels that they have to manage. So there are a lot more dynamics that goes on that they have to struggle with. So managing that complexity and uh, definitely, if you were to look at political leaders who've done something extraordinary for society, then I think what stands out to some of the leaders that I have studied and written about in the book, like Nelson Mandela or Abraham Lincoln or Gandhi or even A.B. Vajpayee recently, Lal Bahadur Shastri, I think one of the things that was very common for all of them, but they were all individuals of great moral values, right? Even though they were political. So they had made those choices in their lifetimes. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that is a very satisfactory answer. Yeah, thank you so much. Now I would like to request Professor Momita Roy, who has a question and would like to ask you. Professor Momita, if you can unmute yourself and.
Yeah. Hello, Professor Gupta. Firstly, it was a very interesting and engaging conversation. I really learned a lot. So I really like your idea of saying that everybody should be treated equally. But my question is that there's a certain expertise that one develops with experience, right? You only get that after you work on that field for a couple of years. But like how what Swati also brought up, like leadership is very essential, say in a pandemic or something. So how would you propose that we treat leaders and followers equally without discrediting somebody's expertise or their experience?
So I truly believe that you cannot respect someone unless you treat that person equally, right? You cannot have. So if you look at the justice theory that we read in OB field, it talks about the interactional justice, right? I'm treated with respect and dignity. I think this mindset of first among equals is not about expertise per se. See, expertise is about getting an idea, right? And as a leader, you may still give directions. So as a PhD supervisor, I still direct my PhD students, right? I still tell them how things are to be done. As a boss, I still direct my subordinates at times, right? I still tell them what is to be done. But I think unless I treat you and I as equal, how will I respect you? That is the point that I am trying to. How will I talk about what are the needs you may have to actually develop and grow? Because I'm not treating you as equal to me. You are somebody who is below me, right? So then that mindset that you are not equal, so I am maybe at a higher pedestal than you are, right? That may at times lead to situations where you may not be treated with that dignity and respect. And I think that as somebody, you see, look at research and development research and development work. Today, I am starting maybe my PhD, but 5-6 years down the line, I can actually get or have substantial knowledge that I can also start contributing, right? Or now, if I have not treated you with that respect and dignity, because I never considered or I do not consider you as equal, right? I think that would not have that kind of a lasting relationship that is needed to succeed and sustain in a knowledge organization. It is not, please understand, knowledge work is something that, and more and more, and as Professor Ramadhar Singh was mentioning, more and more work may actually become like knowledge work. So I don't know, he is correct. I have not compared it yet to other kinds of work. But the point is, more and more work will start demanding these kinds of relationships, right? Because everything else is going to get automated. Believe it or not, not today, 5 years down the line, anything that is routine or monotonous will be taken away. What we will be left with is the thinking work. Okay, so to, in that sense, you need to have that continual relationship going with your people, and to have that, we have to have that equal mindset. And I think one of the things that I have tested though this research was for knowledge, I have tested it in my family, right? I try to treat my daughter as an equal, right? So it is not a father has said and the daughter has to do it, right? You've got to listen to what she is saying. There is something that, and if you don't treat somebody as equal, you cannot respect them. That is the mindset that I am coming from. That is the point that I'm trying to make. As problem of our society, I believe, is we have been broken down into so many hierarchies that we have stopped thinking of people as equal. Innately, people were born equal, right? I'll not go there, but that is the mindset. That is the point that I'm trying.
Okay, thank you, Momita, and thank you, Professor Vishal. There is a question by SM Nath, and I would request him to ask his question on camera if possible.
He's out of the meeting again.
Okay.
So there's some issue because he's joining and then he's
Okay, so then you may take his question forward, Swati.
okay. Mr. Nath had this question about how much cultural constraints block the leadership from being, from that egalitarian point of view. So especially, I think the Indian cultural constraints, he might be referring to that.
Yeah. So I think I just mentioned that hopefully our society itself will change over time. Okay, and as we progress, we will actually start expecting more of such kind of a treatment. But yes, as there is a huge baggage, there is no doubt about it. There is a huge cultural baggage that as a society we will have to overcome in order to sort of achieve this mindset of first among equals, that there is equality, but then as a leader I have some responsibility to undertake, and it happens all the time. uh, if you look at our organizations, one of the things that really happens, which is so saddening, is when I become a leader, I start doing the same kinds of things that I hated as a subordinate. Today I am a faculty, tomorrow I may become a dean, and I may actually start doing the same things, right? Now, because I have perhaps forgotten that once upon a time I was in that particular situation, I was at that time, because power is, yeah, with power, it is very important to understand how do you actually manage it and remember that idea of equality eventually. Yeah. So yeah, there is a cultural problem, cultural constraints exist.
Thank you so much. I have one question
Yes.
that I would like to ask, because what I believe is that people look up to leaders and they believe that, okay, their leaders have all the answers, but actually leaders must have right set of questions. And nobody, generally I've seen, whatever in my limited experience, that people care less about leaders' question and they look up to them for answers of solutions. So that is one thing that I've seen. So I would like to ask, what are some critical questions that a leader must ask to himself or herself and to the subordinates?
So you have three parts. First, to ourselves, then to subordinates,
Yeah,
right?
followers or to the team. Yeah.
Okay, so um, uh, well, I think as a leader, the if we can just ask one question, that so as an individual, if I just ask myself, am I doing what I am saying, right? So I think that part of that authenticity and that integrity question, which is very important, as a society also. The problem with us is we see so many people around us who are doing one thing and maybe saying another thing. So it is very important for all of us to ask ourselves, are we practicing those values which we are trying to speak to our subordinates, right? And for the subordinates, I can only say one thing or one question: can I help you in some ways, right? Can I help you? Is there some way I can be of help? It is not to say that, well, I will not be firm, but it is an exploratory question to understand, is there a place where you need my help, you need my guidance, you need my support, right? So I think that is very important for each one of us to practice, no matter where we are, which context we are.
Thank you so much.
Just
Yes, Swati, you can.
I would like to just share a few thoughts, because Professor Pandey had asked this, and just borrowing from what Professor Gupta mentioned some time back, that as you grow, you start practicing the same behaviors that earlier you might have rejected or you may not have accepted in your leaders. So as you grow, I think a leader must, or an individual must learn that ability to self-reflect. That is the time of pondering and asking those questions. And I think we get engaged into so many things that we forget that self-reflection part, and that is something that may be missing out, and has to be brought back. In how to do that, maybe another level goes into spirituality or something, but yeah.
No, I think uh, if you look at uh, all leaders and you read their life stories, okay, that is another research project that I'm sort of trying to look at, is if you look at and read the life stories of good leaders or people who've had impact, there has always been an element uh, of some kind of positivity, some kind of spirit. We can call it as spirituality, we can call it as religiosity, we can call it as whatever, but there has been a very, very positive outlook that they have had about others, about people with whom they have interacted. They had a very strong inner positive qualities that could help them survive and sustain over time and not get dejected with the things that were thrown at them. So that reflection, that whatever we would like to call, is they had that kind of a quality in
Swati, if you have any, because sir, we have already taken 5-6 minutes extra. So if Swati has any last questions or anything you would like to ask.
No, thank you. I have almost asked all my questions. I would like to thank Professor Gupta once again for talking not just about the book, but beyond the book. So many things we discussed today about leadership, And I mean, my thoughts are just going back to those keywords of being empathetic and compassionate again and again. So how to bring that in is a challenge, but yeah. So thank you, Professor Gupta, for your time, and we have already spilled over. So
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. Thank you for all the comments, and I can honestly say I don't have all the answers, but these are just some reflections I've been having post the book, post the research, just to sort of reflect on the state of leadership and our society that we are all in.
Thank you so much to everyone, and thank you so much, Professor Gupta, for agreeing and for joining us.
No, it is my
Having this
pleasure.
wonderful talk, and we are also thankful to
Professor Singh is, I think he's just applauding and giving reaction.
My internet is unstable, it says. Unstable internet.
Now you are audible. Now you are audible, sir.
No, but I'm seeing my picture on the screen rather than picture of you people. And message comes unstable internet.
Okay.
this is a wonderful talk, and we are also thankful to Professor Singh for joining us, and to everyone. And we'll share the recording soon. And thank you so much, everyone. And we'll be kind of inviting you again on next Saturday. By then, we are thankful to all of you. Thank you, Professor Gupta, again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.